The story began on a sunny day when the protagonist was surprised to see two suns shining brightly in the blue sky. The strange sight became familiar after 10 days, and he found it mysterious how adaptable humans could be. When he was thrown into that world in his pajamas, he had wondered how he would manage to cope, but somehow he did. He even admitted that he wanted to applaud his own ability to adjust. Ayah came by, calling Tasuku and asking him to go hunting since she had never stockpiled so much food before. She had a tail and even cat ears. Tasuku replied that he didn't want to be chased by a wild roar again. Ayah responded, wondering if he was referring to that small mishap the other day, and mentioned that he didn't get to see big game like that every day. Just then, another girl dressed in rather revealing clothes arrived, saying that she was glad they were finally there. She showed a victory sign and said she had just come up with a new design and thought they might want to try it on. Ayah told Belle that if it was going to be one of those outrageous outfits like last time, she would refuse to wear it. Belle teasingly called Ayah so-called. Then, a third girl came running toward them, calling out to Tasuku. Catching her breath, she asked if he was going to the forest again. Tasuku agreed and asked what was wrong. She got excited and requested that he gather some nuts for her, as she wanted to mix them into her bread, and also bring some spices if possible. Belle commented that the design of her clothes was vivid and full of emotion, and there was nothing wrong with it. Ayah wondered what she was even talking about, knowing she probably wouldn't understand her reasoning anyway. Tasuku thought that his life had become surprisingly bustling. What had started as a one-man survival game had turned into something so lively in just 10 days. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how he had ended up in that strange world. He recalled that his name was Kiki Tasuku, a 30-year-old single man who worked at a black company known for its long hours and low pay. He had been an average office worker, living a stressful daily routine that he eased through games and cooking. That particular weekend had begun under a gloomy, rain-laden sky, yet his heart had been bright as ever. He had been happy to go home without doing overtime, and on that Friday, when he could finally leave on time, he had wondered what other miracle could compare. He had stocked up on food for a quiet weekend of hibernation, planning to relax at home, jump into the lab, and maybe whip up some snacks while watching gameplay the next day. The lab was an online game released around 10 years earlier, a life-building simulation where players explored a vast virtual world, gathered materials, and crafted buildings and tools. It was an open-world game where one could create their own living environment, and Tasuku had been completely hooked on it as a working adult. Finding time to play had been difficult, so when he finally came home early after long days of overtime, he had been thrilled. Days like that were rare. He had prepared his food and cushions, planning to spend a cozy Friday night and make the most of his weekend. It was going to be perfect. But just as he picked up his console to play, the light suddenly went out. He had wondered what was going on, checked the breaker, and found no problem. Looking out the window, he thought it might be due to the lightning storm, though he couldn't help but feel frustrated that it happened just when he wanted to relax. His console might still run on battery, but without Wi-Fi, he couldn't play online. He had considered giving up, but unlike most, he hadn't stopped there. Realizing his phone connection still worked, he decided to tether it to get online and continue playing. He knew the communication cost might go up, but it would only be until the power returned. Ready to dive into the world of the lab, he suddenly found himself surrounded by a blinding white light. When he opened his eyes sometime later, he was lying in a vast grassy field. Looking around in confusion, he thought that at least he was still alive. But when he looked up at the sky, he was startled to see not one, but two suns shining brightly above him, a sight far different from the dimly lit room he had just been in. He wondered if the lightning shock had somehow caused this, and if this was what people meant by being teleported into another world. Thankfully, since he had read plenty of otherworldly light novels and manga, he managed to accept the situation without losing his composure. Considering where he was, he thought the most likely explanation was that he had been transported into the lab world just before the blackout. He reasoned that if all his game skills had carried over, then maybe he could use that data, and becoming a cheat-like character, as often seen in novels, might not be just a fantasy. He tried to test it by calling for his status to open, but nothing appeared. Feeling uncertain, he wondered if his voice was too quiet and kept shouting various commands for the skill or status display to appear, but nothing happened. After several failed attempts, he knelt down in disappointment, thinking it had all been too convenient to be real. Maybe he hadn't been transferred into the lab after all, but rather to an entirely different and unrelated world. Lying back on the grass, he wished it were only a dream, though it felt too real to be one. He soon realized he had ended up in a new world with nothing but his sleepwear and no apparent abilities. Still, he thought that if it really were the lab, he should be able to gather materials by hand. He decided to try and swung his hand over a patch of grass. Surprisingly, it was cleanly cut and turned into seeds right before his eyes. Startled, he began cutting more grass and plants, noticing that while some turned into seeds, others simply vanished, just like in the game. Encouraged, he went to a nearby tree and tried cutting it, imagining the motion of swinging an axe. To his amazement, his bare hand sliced through the trunk effortlessly, and it didn't even hurt. He successfully chopped down the tree, realizing that the material gathering system worked exactly like in the lab. Collecting the wood, rocks, and other resources, he concluded that the world he was in followed the same system as the game. Now he just needed to check if the other mechanics worked as well. After that, he touched the fallen tree and used the rebuild ability. Instantly, all the cut pieces of wood reshaped themselves into different forms. From this, he understood that rebuild was an ability used to process gathered items into usable materials. In the game, this function was meant to let players combine rebuilt materials to craft tools and other useful items. He then combined 2 logs, thinking that the 2 pieces of wood could merge into one seamless piece, and believed he could do the same. He wasn't sure if it was the lab world, but he thought that if he could use those 2 skills even in such an empty situation, he would be able to survive. Working for so long at a black company had exhausted him socially, and he had always dreamed of living a self-sufficient life amid rich nature. He decided to start his second life in the great outdoors and told himself to stay positive about it. Tasuku knew that he needed water and food to survive and had to start a fire. Since he had decided to live in that world, it meant he couldn't keep himself warm or cook his food easily. The most important thing, however, was to stay cautious of any danger that might come his way. He looked around, wondering where to build his house. As he observed the forest and mountains surrounding him, he gave a keener look and faintly spotted an ocean in the distance, though it seemed quite far. He realized it would make sense to set up a base in the forest where food and water were available, but without the skills to dodge threats or monsters, like in a game, it could easily be game over for him. So he decided to settle there. Before starting, he thought surviving in just that outfit and barefoot would be too harsh, so he decided to make some shoes. He touched the wood, mentioning reconstruction, and turned them into oddly angular shoes. Even though the fit was uncomfortable, he couldn't afford to be picky and was just grateful he wasn't hurt. He then moved forward to gather materials and started chopping. It felt strange to cut down trees with his bare hands, and it amazed him how real the experience felt. Just like in the game, he wondered how a tree could fall that way. Realizing he also needed stone materials, he considered breaking a nearby rock. As he touched it, he thought hitting a rock might hurt, but he still gave it a try. To his surprise, the rock split into 2 pieces even though it was solid. Using his rebuild skill, he turned the pieces into small bricks and found he could stack them easily. When he lifted one, he was surprised by how light it felt, realizing that reconstructed materials seemed weightless. With that, he thought building his shelter would be a breeze and decided it was time to gather more materials quickly. He kept searching and gathering materials. At that point, he had collected wood, resin, branches, and bark, and had even managed to find some fruits. However, he still didn't have enough wood to build his house, so he needed to go deeper into the forest. He didn't know whether that part of the forest had ever been touched by humans, but he was certain that a variety of creatures lived inside. He also had to find a water source soon. As he noticed the sun beginning to set, he realized he had to finish everything before it got too late. The first thing he needed to do was prepare a fire for safety, since dangerous animals usually stayed away from flames. He decided to use an old medieval-style method to make the fire, something he had only ever done in games before. As a salaryman, he had never imagined he would actually use such primitive tools in real life. He kept rotating the stick inside the log, thinking that he was completely lost and even feeling as if his hands were about to peel. After some effort, he finally managed to produce sparks. Quickly, he placed some dry grass over them, careful not to extinguish the flame. Slowly, the fire caught, and he smiled in satisfaction, proud of his accomplishment. He couldn't believe how genuinely happy he felt for making fire with his own hands, and for the first time, he truly appreciated how convenient a gas stove was. But he couldn't afford to get lost in his thoughts for long. He surrounded the fire with stones to prevent it from spreading. If it caught, there would be nowhere to run. Acting quickly, he made a makeshift torch by coating a piece of wood with resin. With that done, it was finally time for him to head deeper into the forest. With the torch in hand, he stepped into the forest, realizing how real everything felt. It was much darker than he had expected, and he was glad he had brought the torch with him. He decided to cut wood near the grassland instead of going too deep inside. Just then, he discovered a lake and wondered if it was a stroke of luck. The water was crystal clear, almost like pure spring water. It looked like a lifesaver. His throat was dry, and he wanted to drink immediately, but he hesitated, thinking that drinking raw water could be dangerous. He decided to make a bucket later so he could collect and boil the water before drinking it. By nightfall, he had prepared buckets for fetching water and gathered enough logs. The processed materials felt almost weightless to him, which made transporting them much easier. As the sun set, he remembered that if this world worked like the games he knew, monsters would appear at night. He hurried to rebuild everything quickly and finally managed to construct a solid shelter, completely enclosed with a single door. As he rested inside, he thought about how he wished he could have built a better house. In the world of the lab, a basic square hut with just a door was called a tofu house by beginners. It felt a little sad that even after a decade of experience, he had ended up building the exact same thing. Still, thanks to his building skills, the seams between the wooden panels were neatly hidden, which only added to the tofu look, plain, simple, and square. Even though the house was simple, the door had a sturdy bar to keep intruders out. The floorboards he had laid down worked perfectly to counter the effects of radiative cooling, and he had even made small air vents near the top for ventilation. For a first attempt at building a house, it turned out quite decent, and if he ever found it inconvenient, he could easily remodel it later. He decided to have a meal with the boiled water and the fruits he had gathered. Looking at one of the fruits, he thought its shape resembled a mandarin, but its red color reminded him of an apple. He wondered if it was even edible. He took a cautious bite, and to his surprise, it tasted just like an apple. Amused, he decided to name it Mingo. He found the food tasty, but realized he needed proteins and fats to survive. When morning came, he planned to go to the sea to catch some seafood. He thought about living a good life in that world and wondered if there were other players in the same situation. He also remembered the brown seeds he had gotten while cutting weeds. In the game, such seeds were usually planted to yield wheat in 3 days, but these didn't look like wheat seeds, so he wondered what they could be. Still, he decided to create a field and see what would grow, thinking that if it turned out to be food, it could become a game changer. There were countless things to do, yet he didn't feel uneasy. Instead, he felt truly alive. The next morning, when he woke up, his waist and back hurt badly, and he understood that sleeping on the floor without a mattress would leave him sore. It was his second day in that world, and as he stepped outside, he wondered how everyone else was doing. Physically and mentally drained from the previous day, he had fallen asleep without dreaming, expecting to wake up back in the real world. But since that didn't happen, he concluded that he was stuck there. The day seemed pleasant again, so he decided to go to the sea to look for seafood and seawater. Judging by the direction where the two suns had set the previous day, he figured the north led to the forest with a river and the south led to the ocean. He started heading toward the ocean, thinking that the sun should rise in the east and set in the west. He wanted to believe in the laws of the universe, but the presence of two suns made him doubt everything. As he walked endlessly, he wondered how far the flat land would stretch. When he encountered a large patch of tall weeds, he began cutting them using only his bucket, and soon realized that he could still gather materials with tools without losing their effectiveness. That meant he no longer had to strike wood or rock directly with his bare hands. Each time he did so, it gave him a strange thrill. but he also understood that if his abilities suddenly stopped working, he could seriously injure himself by slamming his hand against a rock. He decided it was time to make some proper tools. Eventually, he reached the ocean and remarked that the white sandy beach and the clear, beautiful sea looked just like a resort. The area was surrounded by steep cliffs, which made him wonder if it was a cove. His first priority was to find food and catch some fish, but he didn't have a fishing rod. He thought about finding some shells instead, and when he put his hand into the ocean, he discovered something that reminded him of a surf clam. Thick, rock-like, and seemingly delicious. While exploring further, he sensed something nearby, went to check, and found a cast iron pot, which confirmed that there were traces of civilization and people in that world too. Tasuku was filling the water bucket, and as he carried it back, he felt extremely tired and sluggish, having been stuck at his desk for what seemed like ages. He realized there was little he could do about it. He decided not to take the water home immediately, thinking about the cast iron pot, the seawater, and the treasure trove of clams he had found. The discoveries were exciting, but bringing them back would be a hassle, and he knew he needed to toughen up to survive. He concluded that he should let the clams expel their sand for a while and just heat the seawater so that the salt would appear once it evaporated. Next, he considered the tools he would need: a hoe for the garden, an axe for chopping, and a shovel and pickaxe. He resolved to make 4 of them first. He decided to sharpen a stone brick and then combine it with wood, eventually managing to craft all 4 tools. He thought that now he would no longer have to strike rocks and trees with his bare hands. Tasuku then planned to begin the food procurement mission and considered setting up a garden nearby. Although he had not gardened since elementary school, he recalled some knowledge from watching The Iron Chef. He started hitting the ground with a tool and was pleased to find that the soil tilled almost instantly. He continued until the task was finished. He had gathered several types of seeds, but decided to start with the round seeds, uncertain what would grow from them. He worried that if weeds sprouted, it could cause trouble. For now, he could only hope that something edible would grow. After planting, he watered the seeds and realized he would need to fetch more water. He reflected on how challenging surviving in this world would be. His first priority was to fill his belly and hope that the clams were ready. That night, he slept, and the next morning he woke up trying to start the day in a good mood for the adventure, but his back and hips were still aching. This made him realize that he really needed to create a bed, or at least a mattress, soon. However, he had a more pressing concern in mind. He needed to make a bath and a toilet. He wanted to soak in a hot bath to wash off his sweat, and if he could heat the bath, he could also use the leftover water for laundry. Above all, he recognized that he needed a relaxing space for his mental health. For hygiene, a toilet was essential. Going outside was extremely uncomfortable, so he wanted a private toilet. He also decided to use the soft leaves around him as toilet paper and planned to gather more. He knew his first priority was to secure materials and supplies according to these needs. As he looked over the field, he noticed that the roots and seeds he had planted had grown considerably. It seemed the crops could be harvested within 3 days inside the lab. There appeared to be no weeds, and he hoped that the food would be safe to eat. As he went to fill the water, he noticed a cat in front of him. It was incredibly cute, and he realized how much of a cat lover he truly was. In his old world, pets were not allowed, but in this new world, that did not matter. Having a cat around would ease his loneliness and add some joy to his life, and he genuinely wanted to live with it. However, the cat suddenly disappeared. He did not expect a stray to warm up to him immediately, but just seeing it had been exciting, and he hoped to encounter it again as he returned to his work. While working, he realized that even in daylight, the dim forest made fetching water a real struggle. As he cut through the woods, he cleared a path to the water source. The logs and stones he had harvested were collected for materials, and he continued building the path until he had gathered a substantial amount. With these materials, he would be able to construct both a bath and a toilet. He decided to start with the toilet, but wondered where it should be built. The smell inside the house was unbearable, and it was too far to make trips outside easily, so he chose a location at some distance to dig. He noticed that the soil changed in texture as he dug, similar to what happened in a game he had played. Some of the soil could be carried in its original form, but with a bit of effort, it crumbled. He started digging and, within a short while, managed to dig up to 5 meters. He used wood to make a seat for the toilet and enclosed it with walls, adding a door as well. The next task was the bath, and since it required fire, he decided to build it away from the house, in the opposite direction of the toilet. A water heater would have been convenient, but that was just a fantasy, so he chose to follow the traditional method. The Goemon-style bath he had seen in books was usually round, but he planned to give it a twist by making it designed for stretching out and relaxing. He eventually completed the bath, a spacious rectangular one built with wood along the edges and stones at the bottom, including a drain. He then set firewood outside to heat the stones and boil the water. After that, he carefully lowered the wooden base to avoid getting burned and prepared to step inside. However, he began to wonder what had gone wrong with his supposedly perfect plan. He continued working and discovered that the water wasn't filling up at all. He realized that making the bath large had increased its water capacity, and if it had been a small round one, there wouldn't have been a problem. But since it was already late, he decided to make several trips to fetch water, as the water source was close enough. While carrying the water, he started sweating, which made him wash his clothes first, so that by the time he finished bathing, they would dry completely. He thought he might as well light the stove fire too, since it would take a long time for the water to boil. Though he found it embarrassing to run around fetching water in just his underwear, he felt relieved that no one was there to see him. After making more than 100 trips between the water source and the bath, the tub was finally filled by evening. He then took a bath and felt completely relaxed. Through this bath, he realized that the water had truly been worth all the effort of building. The square window opened to a view of the distant sea, where the orange sky contrasted beautifully with the deep blue water. Although the bath's design had a few flaws, everything turned out well in the end. However, the exhausting labor of carrying all that water had been a real struggle. He deeply appreciated the civilization from his original world, and wondered if there were others like him who had been transported from their own worlds into this game world. Despite the presence of driftwood along the shore, it didn't seem like anyone lived nearby. Still, he questioned whether there was any way to return if he truly had been transferred here, and thought that the only possibility might be to clear the game. In the online version, the lab staff credits appeared only under certain conditions, but there was never really a concept of clearing the game. Because of that, a version update for space exploration had been scheduled soon, and he wished he could have played it. Even so, being able to construct and rebuild things in this world was enjoyable, and though securing food and renovating the makeshift house were still major challenges, he found the process satisfying. Compared to the life he had led just a few days earlier, buried in endless work, he now felt truly alive. Rebuilding his life in this world didn't seem like such a bad idea after all. Yet, as he soaked in the bath, lost in his thoughts, reality was already preparing to prove him wrong. He came out the next morning, and it seemed that he was in a good mood. He had taken a bath for the first time in ages and had slept peacefully, which made him feel refreshed. However, his back and waist still ached as usual. There was a tool he had been eager to craft, but he thought he should first check the fields to make sure everything was safe. As he approached the field, he noticed the cat nearby. He thought that cats were naturally cautious, so if he moved too quickly, it would run away. That was why he needed to hold himself back for the moment. The calico cat was still keeping its distance, so he decided to take his time and make sure it understood that he meant no harm. He kept smiling there for a while and then went to check the crops. He found that they were wheat, though still not mature enough for harvest. Just like in the game, he decided to wait until a day before they were ready to harvest. After that, he planned to make a fish trap similar to the one he had once built in science class using a plastic bottle. He had gathered stones, wood, and bark, fortunately all the materials he needed, and believed he could create something similar. While he was working, the cat came closer to him. He wanted to pet it but didn't want to scare it away. Trying to stay calm, he thought he might work outside instead of inside so he could enjoy the cat's company. First, he needed to process the bark. As he worked, he thought about how the fibers in the bark could be turned into threads or ropes once processed. He would love to make some beading with it later, but for now, food was his priority. After that, he started using the wood and focused his power to create a cylindrical container with an open-ended cone on top, then combined them. Finally, he tied it all together with the rope, completing the trap. He thought of putting the bait inside the container and letting it sink into the water. The fish, lured by the bait, would swim in through the cone and be unable to escape. It was a simple trap, but he hoped it would work even in this other world. He noticed that the cat had come very close to him. Feeling flustered, he slowly reached out his hand to pat its back and was relieved to see that it didn't run away or seem annoyed. He continued petting it happily, feeling genuine warmth. The cat also appeared to enjoy it, and he realized that even cats in this world were just as adorable. He thought that if he managed to catch some fish, he would share them with the cat as well. He told himself to get ready because he couldn't wait to see the cat enjoy its meal. Gathering his energy, he focused on making traps to catch fish for the little feline. He managed to prepare 6 traps and then headed straight toward the ocean. The cat followed him closely, and now that they had become good friends, he felt that being alone was no problem at all. He grew excited, wondering what kind of fish he would catch. He didn't immediately throw the traps into the ocean. Instead, he took out some meat from a clam and placed it inside, thinking that since he enjoyed it as a human, the fish would probably find it delicious too. After that, he tied all the traps securely to a nearby piece of driftwood to prevent them from being swept away and decided to return the next day to check on them. Unfortunately, there was no treasure waiting for him, but he did find some shells, including one resembling a honbinosugai clam, along with a few beautiful purple mussels. Packing up, he looked at the cat and suggested they have a feast once they got home. The cat responded in its own way, as if agreeing. He wondered if it actually understood his words, but even if it didn't, having someone to talk to brought him comfort. With a feline companion beside him, even the longest journeys didn't feel lonely. When he returned, he decided to let the clams soak in the sand for the time being. He asked the cat if it could imagine eating shellfish, but reminded himself that too much salt wouldn't be good for it. The only food left was some mango, but there wasn't much for the cat to eat. Suddenly, the cat vanished from sight, and then he heard a voice telling him not to overthink it, just to share his meal with that little furball. Feeling confused, Tasuku turned around and saw a girl with cat ears and a tail. She told him not to worry about the saltiness and to make the food flavorful, explaining that she wasn't fond of delicate tastes. He should season it boldly. Shocked, Tasuku stared at her face, and she tilted her head, asking if there was something on it. He couldn't help but wonder if the calico cat from earlier had somehow transformed into a human. The thought was unbelievable. She stepped closer, teasingly asking if her beautiful beast form had left him speechless. With a confident smile, she added that for a young man like him, she might be a bit too much to handle, and that in his world, there probably weren't many women as stunning as her. Startled and at a loss for words, Tasuku finally managed to ask if she had just mentioned another world. She nodded, asking if he wasn't from a different one. He was taken aback and wondered how she even knew about that. Then, flustered, he asked if she could at least put on some clothes before continuing their conversation. She laughed lightly, saying he seemed easily embarrassed over something as simple as clothing. A moment later, she reached up toward a glowing portal in the sky and pulled out a giant bag, telling him to relax. It was just the two of them there. She began taking out her clothes and casually mentioned that she didn't care much about what others might think. Blushing, Tasuku turned his face away and said that meeting someone for the first time like that wasn't exactly normal. As she dressed, she smirked and asked if he had already forgotten that the person fetching water the previous day was wearing nothing but his underwear. His eyes widened in surprise as he wondered if she had seen him back then. He had been sure no one was around. She explained that she had been in her cat form and had come from the forest, so seeing him wasn't difficult at all. Once dressed, she looked at him with a smile and introduced herself as Ayah, a member of the cat folk. Feeling confused, Tasuku turned around and saw a girl with cat ears and a tail. Tasuku felt confused, and Ayah explained that he had seen her in her beast form the previous day without flinching. He wondered why he would need to run from a cat. She revealed that the patterns on her body were considered symbols of a curse, despised not only by the cat folk, but also by humans. Tasuku was astonished and asked if calico cats were everywhere. She replied that while that might be true in his world, in the world they were currently in, she was the only calico cat. He was shocked, Ayah continued, saying she wasn't joking. The markings on her stomach were ancient symbols of destruction. Among the catfolk, calicos were feared as cursed children who brought misfortune to their kin. If such a child was born, it would either be banished or killed. Her parents had chosen to banish her. Tasuku found this revelation horrifying. Ayah reassured him that he didn't need to worry, as it was all in the past. In the humans' world, calicos were even seen as symbols of revolution. Tasuku was skeptical, but she smiled and told him that no one in that world would dismiss a calico like her as cute. She also noted that he seemed new to the world and asked if he had any plans. Tasuku admitted he had only just arrived and was still figuring things out, experimenting to see how everything worked. Ayah then said she knew the world well and decided to stay with him. As he began to respond, she turned toward him and asked if he had a problem with that. Tasuku appreciated the gesture, but he noted that living together could be troublesome. The house was small, and it would be awkward for a man and woman to live together. She teased that he might lose control seeing a beautiful girl in front of him, reminding him that he had stared at her bare body earlier. Tasuku insisted he hadn't. She told him to calm down, claiming she knew he didn't have the courage for anything inappropriate, and reminded him that he had previously said he wanted to live together. Was that a lie? He replied that it wasn't a lie, but that statement had been meant for the cat. She smiled and said there wouldn't be any issue now as she entered. Tasuku quickly asked her to wait, insisting that the decision hadn't been finalized yet, and pleaded with her not to remove her clothes. The next day, he got up without proper sleep and went to the sea to check the traps. Ayah was yawning behind him, looking half asleep, which made him wonder if the catfolk were nocturnal, like the cats from his old world. Ayah asked if they really had to wake up so early, saying that since Fizz, who was caught in the traps, hadn't escaped, Tasuku could have slept longer. Tasuku thought it was all her fault that he couldn't sleep well. He then recalled the previous night when he had been trying to sleep, but Ayah had asked if he was really sleeping like that. She had taken out a rug and requested to use it, saying it was better than lying directly on the floor. Tasuku appreciated it, but asked about her. She had replied that she preferred sleeping in a less restrictive way, and that it was warm enough inside with the cloths she already had, so she would sleep just like that. Tasuku had agreed and lain down to sleep. However, while sleeping, he had felt something soft, and, upon waking, found Ayah clinging to him without any clothes on. Startled, he had shouted loudly, waking her up. She had wondered why he had woken her up like that, while he had questioned why she was holding on to him while sleeping. Ayah had replied that the new environment hadn't helped her sleep much, and while searching for a comfortable spot, she had somehow ended up on his bed. Returning to the present, he thought that was the reason he couldn't get back to sleep after that incident, which had led them to collect the fish traps at the sea. They caught 4 fish, each about 20 centimeters long, which wasn't bad at all. He asked Ayah what those fish were called, and she replied that they were striped jackfish. Tasuku understood that they were quite different from the striped jackfish of his own world. He also learned that Mingo was actually called apple in that world. It looked similar but was completely different. Afterward, he returned home to craft a workbench and a knife, preparing to cook the fish. Since he was quite skilled at cooking, he began cutting the fish carefully. Ayah teasingly called him a novice, saying that a charming, bare-skinned lady had clung to him, so he should have enjoyed it and gone back to sleep. Tasuku replied that it had been more of a shock, and he asked if she really considered herself charming. She wondered what he meant by that, and whether he was implying that her body wasn't attractive enough. Tasuku, flustered, said that it wasn't true. Ayah then moved closer to him, saying that he was adorable. Tasuku looked confused, and as she turned away, Ayah told him that he didn't need to say anything. She could already tell from his expression. Tasuku mentioned that he was a 30-year-old man, so the word adorable didn't apply to him. Ayah was surprised to learn that he was 30 years old, and remarked that outlanders like him tended to look younger than their actual age. Tasuku, equally surprised, asked about her age. She shook her head and said that it was rude to ask a girl about her age. Tasuku thought that she looked like a high schooler, though her way of speaking was oddly old-fashioned, which puzzled him. After that, he finally went to cook the fish. While grilling it, he thought about harvesting some barley as well. When he reached the field, Ayah was already standing there in disbelief that the crops had fully grown in just 3 days. She explained that the round barley was considered a luxury item. which made Tasuku wonder if barley was really that valuable in that world. She explained that there were different kinds of barley, and the one commonly eaten was a variety called fine barley. It thrived even in harsh soil, unlike round barley, which only skilled farmers could cultivate. She added that refining fine barley left very little edible material, so people usually ground it with the husk and mixed it with the grains to bake bread. Tasuku wondered if that was similar to the black bread from his old world. Ayah said that bread made solely from round barley was considered food for nobles and the upper class. Tasuku then understood why it was so valuable, though he thought it was strange since the seeds he had used came from the weeds he had cut down. Ayah didn't believe him and told him to save the jokes for later. Zhao thought that he had simply used the same method as in the game, though he guessed it wasn't normal in that world. He used his hands to cut everything perfectly, which surprised Ayah. She remarked that the more she saw his ability, the more fascinating it became, and she wondered if all outsiders possessed such powers. Zhao agreed, saying that he hadn't met anyone else since arriving there, so he didn't really know. She then asked if he would mind coming with her for a while after they finished their work. Tasuku wondered what she meant by that. Ayah explained that since they had obtained round barley and were planning to bake bread, she thought they should prepare a fitting dish to go with it, which meant gathering some ingredients. As Tasuku began to guess what she was referring to, Ayah smiled and said that he really was quick to understand that they would be going hunting in the forest. As they entered the forest, Tasuku trembled at the thought of going ahead, while Ayah remained calm and told him to relax, assuring him that she wouldn't leave him behind. Tasuku said that even though she told him not to worry, those things still terrified him. Ayah reassured him again, saying that whether it was a bear or a giant snake, she could easily handle it. Tasuku wondered how she planned to fight since she didn't seem to have any kind of weapon. She revealed that she already had one. Curious, Tasuku wondered if it was some kind of magic. She replied that it wasn't magic at all and that it would be faster if she simply showed him. As she took position, Tasuku was unsure of what was happening. She told him to stay quiet and get down. A moment later, she moved her hands forward as if striking something and said that it was a wild rabbit. Tasuku wondered what she had just done. Without explaining, she told him to follow her, saying that he would understand soon enough. When they reached the spot, they found a rabbit lying dead, struck by a sharp spike she had thrown. It was of a good size, and Ayah said they should gratefully accept the bounty. Tasuku was amazed and asked if she had really done that. She revealed that she had always been skilled at throwing needles and had once made a living as a hunter. Tasuku admitted that it was truly impressive. Afterward, Ayah explained that to keep predators away, they should clean the prey far from the house, and even if any danger approached, she would take care of it. Tasuku found her words reassuring, though he still felt confused about how she could use something as small as a needle as a weapon, especially against large monsters. Just then, Ayah sensed something and told Tasuku to stay back, explaining that a large monster seemed to have caught the scent of blood. Tasuku, confused by what she meant, suddenly heard the frantic chirping of birds and grew frightened, wondering what was happening. Ayah said that it was coming, and moments later, they saw a boar charging toward them, startling Tasuku. It was a giant boar with two massive tusks that charged directly at them. Tasuku thought it was reckless, as the boar's strength and size were overwhelming. He realized they should run away, but then noticed that Ayah had already gone to fight the creature and had leapt high into the air. Tasuku found it insane and mentioned that the boar was too big for throwing needles to work. He saw her make several needles appear near her head. Instead of throwing them, she stabbed them first and then released them at such high speed that they tore through the boar's body. After defeating it, she finally jumped down. She explained that normally the boar wouldn't react so quickly, so it must have been hungry and nearby. Although it wasn't planned, they had managed to get meat and a hide from it, so no one should complain. Seeing Tasuku's frozen face, she questioned why he wouldn't fight courageously like her. He thought that if she had just extended her claws to kill it, the power would have been terrifying. He admitted to himself that he had never seen abilities like hers in any game he had ever played. It seemed that even his lab experience wouldn't be of much help in a world filled with mysteries beyond imagination. He decided that he would definitely stay away from the deeper parts of the forest. Ayah called out to him, asking him to stop zoning out and give her a hand. Tasuku wondered what kind of help she needed, and she replied by tying the boar with a rope, saying they were going to take it apart. Tasuku asked if they were really going to butcher it, and she explained that something of that size couldn't be processed alone. Tasuku, still surprised, said he had never butchered a boar before. She told him that it was no different from cutting a fish, but he kept insisting that it was completely different. She stated that experience was the key and urged him to hurry and finish it. He thought he might use his rebuild skill to break it down. As he approached, she encouraged him to try it. Tasuku said it was time to show how incredible his power was, then used rebuild and cut off the skin instantly. Ayah was surprised, remarking that even a seasoned hunter would struggle to skin something so cleanly, and admitted that it was truly impressive work. He wondered if it was only the hide and planned to separate the hide, meat, and organs neatly. However, he thought he might need to peel off the hide first before separating the rest. When he tried to use rebuild again, nothing happened, so he wondered if there was a limit to what he could rebuild. Ayah asked what was wrong with him and why he was standing there slack-jawed. Since the hide had already been peeled so perfectly, she said that processing the organs should now be easy. Tasuku wondered if he could leave that part to her, but she asked what nonsense he was talking about and told him that he needed to see the process through to the end. Leaving it unfinished, she said, would be like drifting straight to the grave. Tasuku mentioned that he was a bit exhausted, but Ayah ignored his complaint, saying she would show him how to do it. She told him to hold the knife as she did, and make a cut. As she taught him, he thought his memory of what he was doing felt strangely fuzzy, yet as instructed, he found himself butchering the boar. The 6th day in Tasuku's world began, and after the hunting and butchering of the previous day, he had been completely exhausted and gone to bed early. That morning, he woke up next to Ayah, just like before. Back by the ocean, the first thing he did was check the fish. Ayah sat nearby on the wooden floor and told him that he would get used to it eventually, asking him to trust her. Tasuku wondered if she realized how shocking it was for him to wake up beside a girl like that, thinking he would never get used to it. She mentioned that she was a beauty, to which he wondered why she couldn't at least sleep with her clothes on. She replied that being without clothes inside the house was more comfortable. Tasuku argued that it didn't mean she had to cling to him, but she said that staying by his side gave her warmth, so it was fine. He wondered if she was using him as a living heater. Suddenly, he noticed that she was much closer than before and was startled, asking her not to sneak up on him like that. She apologized, saying she hadn't meant to scare him. Tasuku then told her to collect the traps, but she stopped him, saying she wanted to tell him something first, that if he really couldn't get used to seeing her like that, he could always make a move on her. Tasuku was confused, and she added that once he got used to the feel of her skin, he would adjust to it, whether he liked it or not. Completely flustered, he heard her add that she wouldn't mind if it was him. He was left speechless, and then she laughed, admitting that she had only been joking and asking if she had scared him. Tasuku said it had been a cruel joke. Ayah moved ahead, apologizing and saying he was so cute that she couldn't stop herself from teasing him. Tasuku took a deep breath, thinking he really needed to act on the idea he had been considering. They were both heading back when Ayah wondered if Tasuku was thinking of expanding the house. He replied that, technically, it was just a rebuild, and that he had been considering it for a while. Ayah questioned whether they really needed more space, as it seemed sufficient for the two of them. Tasuku thought the house was practically overflowing with boar meat, and suggested that if they built a storage room, they could store food there as well. He also wanted to add a bedroom and a proper kitchen, so he considered it the perfect opportunity. Ayah mentioned that there would only be one bedroom. Tasuku asked what she meant, since they would each have separate rooms. Ayah felt annoyed, wondering if he disliked sleeping next to her that much. Tasuku explained that it wasn't that he hated sleeping beside her, but whenever he got up, she would end up waking as well, and she always looked so sleepy throughout the day. He asked if she wouldn't prefer to sleep in as much as she wanted. Ayah fell silent for a moment, considering that it might be true, and then wondered if having separate bedrooms meant Tasuku could sleep without worrying about her. She added that she didn't really mind waking up with him. Tasuku then mentioned that he needed to take care of another matter. He went to check the drying boar hides and said that if he could turn them into bedding, he could return the mat he had borrowed from her. He then apologized and asked what she had been saying earlier. Ayah said it was nothing and explained that she had just called him an idiot to hurry him inside the house, slamming the door behind her. Tasuku was still unsure if he had said something wrong. He suggested that they eat before starting to cook and added that since the house was cramped, it would be better to cook outside. As he grilled the fish, he noticed Ayah approaching and told her it would be done soon. She remarked that expanding the house might be unavoidable. Tasuku agreed, admitting that it was getting a bit tight. She then asked if there was anything else they should prioritize building. Tasuku considered it for a moment, and Ayah mentioned the idea of a well. Tasuku replied that a well would make dealing with water much easier. She agreed, and Tasuku added that once they finished expanding, they would definitely dig a well. Suddenly, Ayah seemed disappointed, and Tasuku reassured her, saying that she had really saved him. Thanks to her, they had meat and hides, and life felt more fulfilling. She told him not to flatter her unnecessarily, but Tasuku insisted he wasn't flattering her. He admitted that he had thought he could manage alone, but after the boar hunt the previous day, he realized he wouldn't have known what to do without her. Ayah responded with a cold reaction, and Tasuku commented that her hunting skills were truly incredible. Ayah felt proud and acknowledged that her skills were impressive. Tasuku continued, noting how effortlessly she moved through the dense forest. She replied that the forest wasn't difficult for her, and she knew exactly where everything was. Tasuku then asked if that included mushrooms and wild greens, and she confirmed, even offering to gather them if he wanted. Tasuku was pleased and mentioned that they needed more vegetables. Ayah, confident in her abilities, told him to leave it to her, promising to gather the bounty of mountain treasures that would surely amaze him. After that, they ate the fish, and Tasuku noticed that Ayah was in a very good mood. He thought that was what mattered most, though he still wondered why she had been so resistant to expanding the house. After some time, Ayah prepared to leave to gather plenty of materials for Tasuku. Tasuku agreed, counting on her to collect the wild greens as well. She then set off to gather everything, while Tasuku continued chopping wood for the expansion. After about 2 hours, Tasuku had collected a large pile of wood, and Ayah returned with the green vegetables and other items he needed. Tasuku suggested that they take a break, but Ayah pointed out that he had a visitor. Confused, Tasuku asked for clarification. Ayah explained that if her eyes were not deceiving her, it was the dark elf. A lady was standing nearby looking at the boar skins that Tasuku and Ayah had just placed there. Tasuku and Ayah were returning, and Tasuku was thinking about the guest, though he didn't know anyone in that world. According to Ayah, that guest was a dark elf, and she had read about them in fantasy novels. As they arrived, they found a girl near a boar's hide, and her outfit was extremely revealing. She said that she had a quick question for them. Tasuku asked Ayah if all dark elves in that world dressed like that. Ayah denied it, saying that although she had lived a long time, she had never seen an elf dressed in such a manner. The elf wondered if the animal hides had been hunted by them. Tasuku agreed, curious about her question. She asked if she could make it easier to explain and mentioned that she had a favor to request, whether they could spare her some of the hides. Ayah wondered if she really was a dark elf and why she would need the hides, questioning why she couldn't hunt them herself. Belle explained that it was a bit of a problem for her. Ayah said that if Belle didn't want to explain, they wouldn't force her to share the details. Belle hesitated, but eventually mentioned that they had insisted on knowing, and she had made them promise to keep her story a secret. Ayah noted that Belle wasn't really listening to them, while Tasuku remarked on how unique her voice was. After that, she shared her life story with both of them, and they had no choice but to listen quietly. They learned that she had once lived in a dark elf village hidden in the northern forests and mountains. The village was well off, and she had enjoyed a peaceful life. However, there was one thing she would never compromise on: her dream of working in fashion. Ayah wondered what that meant, and Tasuku explained that it was a profession involving clothing design. Belle said that she wanted to start her own brand and call it Belle Mark, though Tasuku suggested they might want to reconsider the name. Nevertheless, when she had brought up the idea in her village, everyone had rejected it, which had greatly frustrated her. It turned out that her village harvested cotton and stored all animal hides from hunts as communal property. Belle explained everything that had happened to her, shouting that the villagers were stubborn and close-minded. Like stereotypical old fogies, they refused to listen to her. She added that hunting large animals with high-quality hides was difficult to do alone. Ayah wondered if Belle only wanted the poor-quality hide to make clothing, and Belle confirmed that this was indeed her intention. Just then, Belle noticed Ayla's extremely pale skin, unusual even for catfolk, and her hair, which she found ridiculously gorgeous. When Ayla acknowledged it, Belle remarked that it was rare and admitted she was jealous of Ayla's pale complexion. Ayla explained that it was simply a superstition among the catfolk and humans. Belle then observed that the house looked tiny and boxy. Tasuku explained that they had only just settled there, so the house had been assembled in a rush. Belle seemed amused at the thought that Tasuku had already bagged a huge boar, finding it hilarious. Ayla then brought the conversation back to the matter at hand, suggesting that they could give the boar hide to Belle, but she expected something in return. Belle admitted that she had no money. Ayla, disappointed, remarked that in that case there would be no deal. Belle then mentioned that she would make them something as a thank you gift. They were curious about what she had in mind, and Belle insisted that it would be faster if she just showed them. She then took some crop waste and asked if she could use Tasuku's straw hat. Tasuku said he didn't mind. She asked them to watch carefully, and then, using her power, she transformed the straw into cloth, which startled Tasuku. He wondered if such magic even existed in that world. Ayla admitted she had never seen anything like it before. Tasuku recalled that he had tried to use his crafting ability to make a mat from straw, but he could only manage to make rope or cord. Considering he couldn't even reconstruct the boar, it seemed that his abilities were far from all-powerful. Belle simply asked what they thought of it. Tasuku wondered if all dark elves could perform such magic, but she denied it, explaining that it was her own original skill. She added that she had been sneaking around using the cotton and leather stored in her village, trying to make cloth before her grandfather noticed, and it was only recently that she had really mastered the technique. Tasuku touched the cloth, impressed by how soft and smooth the fibers were, and admitted he would never have guessed it had been made from straw. Belle explained that she could make other items in the same way. She then made a cotton bag appear from a storage in the sky, which startled Tasuku even more. As she demonstrated by creating a face towel, Tasuku became excited, wondering if he could make such things too. Belle replied that it was a very easy task for her, merely an application of the skill she had already shown. Ayla complimented Belle's craftsmanship, and Tasuku added that it was far better than the things Ayla had brought. Embarrassed, Belle told them to stop complimenting her, saying it made her feel awkward. Tasuku felt a little guilty when she snatched the hand towel from him, while Belle quietly muttered that no one had ever praised her that much before. Tasuku wondered if she had just said something, but Belle, flustered, quickly denied it. She then asked how long Tasuku had been living there. When Tasuku replied that it hadn't been very long, she asked if he was having any trouble getting clothes or personal items. Tasuku explained that he was planning to arrange everything soon. Belle agreed to take care of it herself, saying she would make everything he needed and that in return she only wanted his permission to stay there. Just then, Ayla shouted that it wasn't going to happen. She insisted that no matter how amazing Belle's magic was, living there was an entirely different matter. Belle responded with a teasing smile, saying there was no need for Ayla to be so defensive and that she had no intention of getting in the way between her and Tasuku. Flustered, Ayla asked what she was even talking about. Belle replied playfully that she was referring to those lewd things, and assured her she wouldn't make the first move, so Ayla could relax. Ayla, exasperated, said that if that was the case, then she was supposed to let Belle stay. Belle cheerfully said she was looking forward to working with them and extended her hand to Tasuku for a handshake. Tasuku accepted it, asking if she was really sure, since there was still so much to do and it might be inconvenient for her to live there. Belle replied that it wouldn't be a problem at all. In fact, it would be more fun to build things from scratch. Then she turned to Ayla, warning her not to touch them, or else they would make her regret it. Furious, Ayla shouted that this wasn't what they had agreed upon. Belle only laughed and said that it couldn't be helped now. She mentioned that since it was a special occasion, she would make the clothes herself and wanted to give both of them a present. After that, she began her work and left the others prepared inside the house. She then asked them to go and change their clothes. Tasuku felt happy but also guilty because he hadn't done anything to deserve such a gift. Ayla appreciated it as well but felt that she should give something in return. Belle told them not to worry, saying that their earlier compliments about her magic had made her very happy, and this was her way of getting along with them. When Tasuku put on the dress and came out, Belle found it as amazing as she had expected, though in reality, he looked like a clown, which made Ayah laugh a lot. She joked that no matter how vast the world was, no one else could wear such an outfit. Tasuku wondered if he had put on the wrong clothes, but Belle assured him it was the right outfit for him, and questioned why he was asking something like that. He thought that being skilled in magic didn't necessarily mean someone was good at designing clothes, since both were completely different talents. He then began to understand why the Dark Elf elders had opposed her idea. Seeing Ayah laugh, Tasuku asked if she thought she could keep laughing forever. Belle later made matching outfits for both of them. Ayah seemed worried, and Tasuku told her that there was an identical outfit waiting for her inside. Ayah immediately refused, saying she didn't want to change her clothes. Belle told her not to worry and said that Ayah would also look cute if she wore it. Ayah kept refusing, saying she had never agreed to be Belle's little sister. Belle mentioned that she was already 160 years old, and certainly older than both of them, but Ayah revealed that Belle was neither younger nor older than her. Tasuku was surprised to learn that both of them were over 100 years old. After a while, Ayah came out wearing the same funny dress, and Belle complimented her by saying that she looked really hot. By looking at Ayah, Tasuku also began to laugh, which made her shout and ask why he was laughing. She told him that she didn't want to hear anything like that. Belle mentioned that both of them looked amazing and added that she would be creating many exciting designs in the future, so they should look forward to them. After that, their lively household gained another member. With that in mind, Tasuku decided to start expanding the tofu house. He asked Belle to use less flashy designs and to focus on making more practical everyday items. Ayah also helped with the expansion by gathering materials for Belle. Tasuku continued building with the materials he had collected, knowing they needed to hurry since the tofu house felt cramped with 3 people living inside. The materials enhanced by his ability felt weightless, almost as if he were building with toy blocks, and the wooden parts joined seamlessly, creating a flawless finish. Belle was amazed to see Tasuku's power and ability in action. Ayah mentioned that although Tasuku looked plain, he was actually someone from another world, and she wondered why they were bragging and calling him plain-looking when it was unnecessary. Belle said that she had never met a Gentile before, and that it felt incredible, making her feel extremely excited. Ayah then remarked that for Tasuku, building 1 or 2 houses wasn't a big deal. Hearing that, Tasuku relaxed a bit, realizing that the 2 of them were finally getting along. By the afternoon of their 7th day in the world, the expansion had finally been completed. Although the work usually took around 2 days, the sense of accomplishment from transferring their house was immense. He then thought about diving into the grand home makeover reveal. The house was a quiet wooden structure standing proudly amidst sprawling meadows, surrounded by lush forests, where the fresh breeze filled their lungs with nature's vitality. The entrance was on the south side, offering a distant view of the sea. Just beyond the door, a spacious and open living room welcomed them. On the west side of the living room, there was a door leading to the old tofu house, which had been transformed into a storage shed by the master's touch. Dried meat and grains were neatly arranged, making everything easy to find at a glance. Another room had been added adjacent to the shed on the north side. Finally, there was a fully equipped kitchen, complete with the Tasuku's favorite cooking tools proudly displayed. A hallway extended eastward from the living room, with bedrooms built on both sides. In addition, there were 2 more rooms to the north and south, bringing the total number of multi-purpose spaces to 4. Tasuku looked at the house and remarked that it not only ensured privacy, but that the dark elf-crafted beds and trinkets also added a personalized touch. Ayah wondered what he was mumbling to himself. Tasuku asked her not to ruin her mood, insisting that it was the best part. She found it rather creepy and questioned why there were 4 rooms, since it was just the 2 of them and Belle, the elf, so 3 should have been enough. Tasuku decided not to read too much into it, thinking that 3 rooms would only throw off the balance of the house layout. Ayah, however, suspected that perhaps someone he knew was planning to move in. Tasuku replied that he didn't know anyone in that world. She agreed to drop the topic, mentioning that she just had a hunch they might eventually end up with more housemates. Tasuku felt a bit annoyed, thinking she shouldn't go around planting strange ideas about more people joining them. He then paused, wondering where he had left off in his narration. The best part of the house, he thought, was the bed he had crafted together with Belle. It was a true masterpiece of craftsmanship, made with rubber and supported by beams attached to either side of the mat, giving it a gentle, hammock-like sag that provided ultimate comfort. Even by his own high standards, it turned out to be a perfect resting chamber. That night, their dinner also served as a celebration, marking both their cohabitation and the completion of the house's expansion. The two of them held a small party to commemorate the occasion. Their meal had also been upgraded, the newest addition being a bread-like creation made from barley. Tasuku had restructured the barley into flour to make bread without butter, sugar, or yeast, quite an achievement. As an experiment, he had mixed water and salt to knead the dough and baked it thin, which resulted in a wonderful, rich, and subtly sweet treat. Ayah had also foraged mushrooms and mountain vegetables, which were incredibly delicious. Tasuku was especially pleased with the wild spices they had brought back, garlic, chili, and even lemongrass, which allowed him to enhance the flavors beautifully. To him, it felt like a true blessing. And then, during dinner, Belle made a proposal. Tasuku wondered if Belle wanted to start growing cotton. She agreed, explaining that she had run out of materials after making the bed and other items for the house. Tasuku was surprised to hear that. Belle then revealed that their supply had completely run out, leaving them with zero inventory. Tasuku felt bad, knowing that those materials were things she had worked hard to gather. However, she reassured him that it wasn't a problem, saying that making them all had been a lot of fun.